5. Most of the time, left Alaman and then no side dough. Left Alaman, read the ring. All right, here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight, I've got Dan Clairmont. Dan, how are you, sir?
I am doing great. How are you doing, Charlie?
I'm very good, Dan. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you finally. We've met a couple of times at maybe a convention or two, but we've never had the chance to sit down and talk. So we're going to do that tonight. I'm sure you've got quite the story, so we'll jump right into it. Dan, where are you right now?
Right now, we're parked in Oklahoma at Lake Ardmore. Lake Murray in Ardmore, Oklahoma, getting ready to go dancing, not calling, to the great Charlie Robertson and Jet Roberts this weekend at a Red River special dance that they're doing.
Outstanding. Okay. Now you say you're in Oklahoma now. Where are you originally from?
Originally, I grew up in California, Southern California, born in Hollywood, grew up in Los Angeles area. My dad was a square dance caller for 40 years, and I refused to do anything with square dancing because he was a caller. And as a young little lad, I used to be dragged to all of them, kicking and screaming in my cowboy outfits. But I was always in awe of the entertainer he was on the stage and what he did. And it was a lot different back then in the 60s.
Sure.
Later on when later on we moved in 2015 from Orange County, California. Gail and I, my wife, from Orange County, California, we moved to the Austin area in Georgetown, Texas, where we built a home and we lived there for the last 10 years and or 8-9 years. And then when I retired in December of 2023, we decided to sell everything we own, and we went around the world on a cruise. And then we came back and we now own an RV. So we're full-time RVers. We live in an RV full-time. We kind of home base around North Carolina, Raleigh area, because that's where our grandchildren are. And then we have a lot of gigs, calling gigs here in the Texas. So we end up back over here for a month or so at a time. So that's why we were in Texas for this last month or so. And then today we drove from Texas up to Oklahoma. It's only a few hours. And then after being here for a week, we'll head back down to Texas for a week, and then we'll head back to North Carolina. And then throughout the year, we travel. So we take our home with us wherever we go.
Man, that's outstanding. We before we started recording, we were talking earlier, and I won't get too deep into it because it's a long story, I can tell, and I'd love to hear all of it. But this round the world cruise, tell me a little bit about that.
So we decided that it was time for me to think about retirement from work. And at the time, we had been members of the Royal Caribbean Crown and Anchor Society, Diamond members, and we got an email. We decided, and it said, "Hey, we're going to start putting together a world cruise. It's going to leave December 10th of 2023, and it'll come back 9 months later, 274 days around the world, 64 countries, 153 ports. If you're interested, please sign up today." And they gave us a link, and my wife and I talked about it, and we went ahead and we signed up on Halloween of 2021. And then I ended up retiring in December of 23. And then on December 10th, we got on the ship and went around the world and visited the world. So yeah, it was amazing. We got back September 10th, this past September 10th. So
I told you I've taken a few cruises, nothing nearly as long as that, 8, 9 days, 7 days here and there. When you get off the boat, typically there's a couple hours to a couple days to get settled back on land. You get that weird feeling. How is that?
Well, a lot of people have that, and then some people don't. And
Okay.
so Gail and I are very fortunate. We don't get seasick.
Okay.
We even went through the Drake's Passage going down to Antarctica, and we didn't get sick. We were one of some of the few that didn't.
Okay.
And so we don't get the whole motion sickness. I think it's based off of how your body is. And so we don't have that motion sickness that some people do. We know, we have talked to some of the world cruisers who it took them weeks for them to get them settled back to land legs, as we call it.
Yeah.
But we didn't have that problem. I'd say, we missed the ship. Don't get me wrong. After 3 or 4 days, we were ready to get back on. But
okay.
So yeah, but the good thing is we're having a reunion cruise on that same ship in Vancouver, going up to Alaska in September, and so the 600 or so of us that went on the whole entire world cruise are going to meet up there at the ship again.
Outstanding.
So
That's a lot of ports. That's a lot of time at sea and all that. Any highlights? Anything jump right out to you? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot, but what will you remember?
well, I would say there's a few things. The first one is they gave me the opportunity 14 different times for 1 hour in one of the halls, and I was able to teach square dancing 14 different times. And basically, it's like doing a one night stand, a party night, or a first night of a beginner's class. And here's your partner, here's your corner, element left, do right and left grand. And I had a group of two squares that came every time, and so I had to continually add calls because I didn't want them to be bored with the basic, 10 calls. And so I kept adding more and more. And by the time we got near the end, there was a passenger talent show, and my group of two squares convinced me to sign up for the talent show. And so we did a little exhibition for them, and they were fabulous. They were great. And I just picked a very easy song, and we practiced the pattern. I did not rotate the ladies around or anything. And
Right, right.
but we had so much fun, and we got noticed so much that the Royal Caribbean contacted us, activities people contacted us from Miami, and they asked us if we would be interested in becoming what they call talkers, people excursion talkers.
Mhm.
This isn't an excursion, but it's kind of entertainment.
Mhm.
But we're not part of the entertainment group. It would be a different group. And anyway, after discussing it with them and all the different things that we could get or not get from them, we decided that it wasn't for us. And so we didn't want to be at their beck and call of, because I got calling gigs all over the United
Sure.
States. I can't just say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going on a cruise because they called me.
Mm.
So we decided not to do that. But that was a highlight. My highlight for me was Antarctica. I think it was the most beautiful place in the world. Highly recommend anybody in the world to go to it. It takes a little roughness to get down there, getting through the Drake's Passage.
Yeah.
But that was it. And then, but to see so much wildlife between the penguins in Argentina and all the wildlife in Antarctica, the whales and the sea lions and the penguins there. And then when we got over to Africa, we did an African safari for 4 days, and we saw the big five. I'm sure you know who they are: elephants and the rhinos and the leopards and the lions, and I'm sure there's one more in there somewhere. But so anyway, we saw all these animals and in their natural habitats, and it was just amazing, and all the different things we got to see. Of course, in South America, monkeys and all the good stuff that you see in Costa Rica. So animals were a big thing of it. My wife, Gail, she really, really, really enjoyed Japan. One of the cleanest places you'll ever go in your entire life. There's no trash anywhere. And just beautiful people. They all spoke English. They all wanted to talk to us. They all wanted to tell us how much they loved America. And they love their country too, but it was just amazing how much they just enjoyed it. And so we enjoyed them and meeting them and talking to them. And I didn't get to see any square dancers yet. One day maybe I'll get over there to the call.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was just a beautiful country and beautiful people. And so, but there were some places that we looked at each other and said we'll never go back to, and so many of the places we want to go back to. So I think it just depends. A couple places surprised me. Vietnam was one of them. I wasn't expecting it to be a big high-rise bustling city because of what we learned as we grew up. It was part of the war. And but it was just a huge bustling skyscraper cities with trains and buses and people, just stores, and just like you would be here in the United States. And so that kind of surprised me. So anyway, those are the kind of the highlights. And of course we went all through Europe and the Baltic too. So
Trip of a lifetime right there, buddy.
yeah.
I told you we were watching a couple that was on the boat with y'all, watching their podcast that they did from their YouTube stuff. And I joked with my wife. I said I could get through the entire plus teaching if I had that many days at sea with the group. I had no idea you were doing it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, the problem is the halls are limited because there's so many activities, and so you only get it for an hour at a time.
Right.
And so like I said, in the whole 9 months, we were only able to get the hall 14 times, but it was fun to do, and I'm glad we did it. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, there was no pay; it was all volunteer, but
Right.
it was more just to introduce square dancing to people that may never have been introduced to it. So,
That's awesome, man. But y'all were big cruisers before going on something like that.
yeah, I think this was, if I remember right, this was our 21st cruise.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we cruised a lot,
Okay.
different types of ships and sizes and a few different companies here and there just to test them all out and see. But we kind of ended up at Royal Caribbean. So
Yeah, my wife and I, we kind of went back and forth between Norwegian and Royal Caribbean as far as cruise lines. But we've kind of locked into Royal Caribbean here lately. We've done our last few cruises have been on theirs. And so I don't know if we're going to stick with one or not. It depends on where they're going. We still want to do it in Alaska at some point. And of course, we're going over to Europe in a few months. But and that's, and I told you before. I've joked with my wife when we were watching this other couple. I said, "Hey, I got a friend of mine, Dan Clairmont. He said that he was on a world cruise. This has got to be the same thing." Turns out it was. So that's awesome.
yep, yeah, and we know that couple really well.
That's
So.
awesome, man. Well, Dan, how long have you been calling?
So I'm going to back up a little bit
Mhm.
there. My wife and I decided to go ahead and take square dance lessons, or I agreed with her to take square dance lessons
Mhm.
because I told you before I didn't want to have anything to
Right.
do with it
Nothing
because
to
of my
do with
dad.
it.
By that time, late 1980s, my dad had already done from calling, so he was just living life. And so in 1987, we joined a club, a beginner's class, the Ramblin' Rogue Square Dance Club in Mission Viejo, California.
Mhm.
And that became our club. We had a caller teach us and or tried to teach us because we were awful. And and then but we were surrounded by such great people. As you know, in the square dance community, there are so many wonderful, polite people, and this one couple just kept taking us under their arm and wanting to get us involved and get us out to dancing, and if it wasn't for this couple, we probably would have never come back. And so this one couple kind of, they set the tone of what square dancing is all about. It's all about people. And so we ended up getting joining, and then the next year when we were quote unquote angels with a hard badge,
Mhm.
um, another new instructor for that next year took over, and he became a very good friend of mine. His name was Mickey Blanc. He was a caller in southern in the Orange County area, and Mickey and I became good friends. And Mickey basically is the one who I learned from,
Okay.
because the first year you don't really learn a lot. It kind
Sure.
of goes over your head. So anyway, we went through that, and then we became board members and became very active in that club. One of the things in 2009, the National Square Dance Convention was going to be in Long Beach, California, right down the street from where we were. Our club was heavily involved in the preparation and in doing different things within the nationals. One of them I saw was that they were doing this. Grand Square Inc. was doing this free color class, Sunday through Wednesday, and
Yeah.
and why don't you go? Well, I had this thing where I was helping the instructor at the club.
Mhm.
Every week he would teach the class, and then 30 minutes before the class, I would go in with another dancer, and and John and I would alternate, and then we'd go in and we would dance them the calls that the instructor taught him the week before, and up to that point. And so if it was right and left through, veer to the left, whatever he taught him, and so, or lead to the left. Anyway, so we would work that, and I could dance them all day long with the calls that he taught him, but I could never resolve. I could never put anybody back together.
Yep.
And I was so angry with myself because I'm not an analytical thinker. I'm more of a show me type of guy. And so so I wanted to go to this class since it was free and it was there in my hometown almost. And I thought, well, let's go. And nothing else, I'll go through it and they can teach me how to resolve, and then I can go back to helping the instructor. And so I got there and went to the class, and it was amazing. And I had some excellent instructors: Deborah Carroll Jones, John Jones, Virgil Jones, and Ken Ratucci, and then Dee Dee Doherty showed up. And so we got in the class, and Ken Ratucci asked me, "What do you want to learn as a beginner?" There's like 12 of us in the beginners group. And I said, I want to learn to resolve. And nobody else spoke up. And so he taught us one method of resolving. And once I learned how to do the resolve through facing line method,
Yeah.
I was happy. I was like, okay, I don't need to be here for the rest of the week. I'm done. And we practice and practice and practice with the pennies and the dancers and everything. And we just had a good time. But by the end of the 4 days, something kind of instilled in me that this is really cool. This is really fun. And out of the 56 people that were there during going to the school that year, I was awarded the most potential caller or teacher.
Nice.
And they gave me this book that was about, I don't know, maybe 6 inches thick of how to teach square dance classes.
Okay.
And the book was from the 1950s or 60s. I don't even know who it was by. And this thing weighed probably 25 pounds. And they gave me that book as a gift. And I thought, well, wow, I guess maybe I better start thinking about this as possibly doing this. Nothing I really was looking at doing, but I wanted to just help resolve and not feel stupid of go back home all the time. But the other part of me is I've always been in choirs my whole life. I've always sung my whole life. And so I know music really well. And music is a very, very deep part of my passion. But I never thought of putting the two together until that week.
Gotcha.
Excuse me. So at the end of that class, we had the nationals in Long Beach, and that went all through. I did not call. And I went ahead and started joining the Orange County Callers Association group just to kind of interact with these great callers that are in the Southern California area. And many of them just took me under their arm. Well, I happened to go to my first meeting was Lee Schmidt. You may not know him.
I have heard of
Lee
him.
Schmidt, Mr. Crawdad, as they call him. He was, that was his last day, and he was retiring that day, the day I started. And I knew Lee because he was a really good friend of my dad's back in the old days when my dad called. And so Lee, after we got done with the meeting, he called me and he called me over and he said, come out with me. And we went out to this big, humongous old Cadillac, 1970s Cadillac. And he opens up this trunk that you could probably put a car in. And he pulls out two big heavy stands and two Hilton cone speakers and a Hilton 300 amp turntable, a big bag of chords, and then two huge boxes of records. He goes, these are all yours now.
Oh,
I go, well, what do I pay you? And he goes, nothing. You're Ray Clairmont's son. You don't pay me nothing. And so we worked out an agreement so I could give him something. But I was so amazed that I wasn't going to be a caller. And now I got all this equipment. I can be a caller if I really wanted to. And I got all these records. And I didn't even know, I was a computer guy. That's what I grew up with. And that's what I did for a living. I fixed computers. And I saw the guys working with computers. So if I was ever going to do it, that's what I was going to do. And I wasn't going to use records. And long story short is I ended up taking all those records, and I ended up, by the way, getting all of my dad's records too. And I ended up converting them all over to MP3s. Most of them were so scratchy that you just really couldn't use them. Yeah. But it was entertaining to do it. But I learned an awful lot from those callers in that group. Every once in a while, I would get a group together and have our club members and kind of work some things and use them as live checkers. And then I had a group from our clubs, the Ramblin' Rogues, say, well, we need some more DVD training, need DVD plus training. And I knew the calls. That was not the problem. I just didn't have any confidence. And so we put together, I paid for a hall, and we put together once a week. 4 squares showed up every week, and I just practiced basically with them, and all plus, mainstream of course too, but mostly plus calls because they wanted to do, and it was always from different positions. It was always sashayed or left-handed or boys starting in the center instead of the ends, and all these different DVD positions because that's what they wanted. Right. But that's how I was taught by the callers that taught me. So that's why I knew that. I didn't understand what they call standard position, because that just, to me, didn't make any sense. Everything was standard to me. So, but it helped having 4 squares every week and doing that. I just paid for the hall. They donated a little bit, so it contributed to the hall, but they weren't paying me. And it was just fun. They were just friends, basically, saying, hey, you teach us more DVD and you can practice on us. And it worked out really, really well. And I was really happy that I have such good friends, and we are still really good friends with most of those people. Um, but that was just amazing, that process of learning and going through as I started to learn. And then people found out that I could actually sing and do some singing calls. Um, I started buying music from the different producers and picking up some singing calls. And I was at the point where I could do a whole dance of singing calls without any problem. It was the pattern that was killing me
Yep.
because the timing was not right. The flow was not right. Sometimes the resolve was tough to getting there. I needed something else. And I had a call from a great caller in Southern California named Michael Kellogg. And Michael Kellogg called me and he said, you know Mike Hayworth? And I said, well, I know of a call. We used to have a caller named Mike Hayworth, but he's not calling anymore. He goes, he works in the same building you do at your office. And I go, he what? Oh yeah, there's an engineer over there. I think, he's like a third dimension engineer or something over there. And I said, yeah, I helped him fix his computer once. He goes, you need to walk over to his office and tell him he was the best man at my wedding. And he goes, you tell him that he needs to teach you how to call. Okay, so next day I walked over, knocked on Mike Hayworth's door and told him who I was. And he goes, how do you know Michael Kellogg? And I said, well, because he's a square dance caller and I'm learning to be a square dance caller. And he says, I need to come to you so you can help me. And he goes, you want to learn to be a square dance caller? I said, yeah. And he goes, closed the door. And for the next 2 hours, he wrote these ungodly figures on the whiteboard that I had no idea what he did. But Mike Hayworth and I became extremely good friends. He became a great mentor to me. He's in the San Diego area. And almost every day for at least a year, we would walk across the street at lunch for an hour. You can get a Kia, you can get a hot dog and a soda for $1. And he would make me push checkers. And we would talk about formations. And this guy's mind is so analytical. It's amazing. And there's no way I could think like him. He's just so good. And he could just look at the floor and go, okay, and he's got it, and I had to work at it.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was amazing. And so I had the best of the analytical side being taught to me by Mike, and the choreography and the resolve and all that, learning all about relationships, partner lines, corner lines, all the different opposite lady lines, right hand lady lines, and all that stuff, and boxes and whatever. So I learned all that from him, and to this day, when I'm calling, that's what I think of is what he taught me. The analytical side is purely taught by him. But the entertainment side, as being an entertainer, interactive dancers, and all that, that's my personality. I'm a very expressive, outgoing person, and somebody said to me, you need to talk to Charlie Robertson, because he was in Southern California too at the time. And so I contacted Charlie. I said, can I have lunch with you? Can I buy you lunch one time? So on one day or lunch or dinner, whatever it was, we drove out and we met and had him and Christy at the time. I think I don't even know if they were married yet. And we had dinner or whatever. And I said, Mike and I were talking. We decided that you're the right person to teach me the entertainment value of how do we entertain these dancers. And so we had some long conversations about how he does it, what I can do to incorporate some of that. And a lot of the things that I do, many times people come up to me and say, you do it just like Charlie Robertson. I'll say, I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because Charlie is a very good friend, and Charlie helped teach me the one aspect of it after I was learning the analytical mathematics side of square dance calling from Mike Hayworth. So I had two phenomenal mentors in the process of learning. And I give credit to both of them everywhere I go. I would never be the caller I am today without either one of them. But after that, I started picking up dances. I ended up picking up a class and teaching classes. And of course, when you teach, you learn.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's probably the best way. I always tell new callers, if you want to learn how to call, go teach a class.
Yep.
From beginning to end. But you still need mentors. You still need help. You need somebody to bounce questions off of and ideas. And some ideas don't work. Excuse me. Yeah. So anyway, that was kind of the start of everything, and going into the process of learning to be a caller. And then picking up clubs, picking up dances. And then I have to give a shout out to Vic Carey, Shauna Carey's husband. Every time Vic would have a dance, he said, if I'm calling, you show up, you get to do a tip. So I looked at his schedule and I went to almost every dance that he was calling just so I could get one tip in, because that one tip each time got better and better. And it made difference of being able to do that. So I have to give Vic, a thank you all the time to say, you let me do that at your dances, and you didn't have to do that. And so I was so blessed that there's so many great callers in the Southern California area that were able to mentor me, help me, give me opportunities to call with them, to become friends, bounce ideas off of. And there's so many callers I talk to that are in these remote areas that don't have that. And so I know I'm very blessed that I grew up with that in the calling world. And the callers who unfortunately are away from everybody else and don't have a mentor or don't have somebody to bounce ideas off of and don't have anybody to watch all the time, I think are a little bit at a disadvantage. Not that they can't become good callers, but it helps to become a good caller faster.
Yeah. Yeah. You need everything that you mentioned, including dancers. Just you had those four squares coming to you. You can only do so much. If and I was I was fortunate. That's the word I'm looking for. I was fortunate when I was starting out in here in Georgia. There was about 5 clubs within 10 miles of me then. They've kind of fallen off a little bit now. But every time I went, they'd put me up there to do one tip, do a couple singing calls, or I had a couple callers. I'd walk in the door and they're like, go grab your stuff. You're doing the whole dance with me. And we'd split tips and all that. And it was kind of adventurous on their part trying that early on. But yeah, you've got to have that. You've got to have callers and mentors that will put you up, whether it be for a tip or go to lunch with you, that type of thing. Again, super fortunate where I was. I've had a lot of them working through the years. And then as I got further along, going to caller schools. But you named huge names there with Charlie Robertson, good friend of mine. I just had him down here a couple of weeks ago, do a dance with me down here. And I've never got to talk to Vic except at a couple of conventions for a minute or two. I've talked to Sean a couple of times, did a podcast with her. I would love to sit down and talk with him also. Michael Kellogg's another one. I've never had a chance to meet with him. And you also, before we started this, tell me about Jet Roberts.
So Jet was a caller in the Northern California area. And if you know anything about California, Northern California and Southern California was kind of like at war with each other. They don't really kind of, intermix. But the thing is my wife, Gail, she's from Northern California. She's from San Jose area. And so a lot of her family is up there. And so we would go up there a lot, up there in that area. And I got to know Jet because as we were learning to do plus dancing more and more in the late 90s, early 2000s, Jet would come down to Southern California and he would call down there because he is so good. And we got to know him, and we would go out to lunch or dinner with them and, get to know who he is and all this. And then he got, of course, he was always called one of the features callers from California to be in the California State Convention and all these different weekend festivals. And so wherever he went, we would go to those festivals. And of course, we'd go have dinner with him and go out to lunch. And so just to get to know him and Sylvia, and then their daughter, Stella, who was little at the time, and so we got to know him pretty well. And then, so whenever Jet would come into the area, into the Texas, once we moved to Texas, he would stay with us because he would do some calling in the Texas area, and so he would stay at our house, and we love some Jet. Everybody does. Not to take away from anybody else, but he's really one of my absolute favorite callers. I have some great friends and great callers that are probably just as good, but Jet's just one of my favorites. So, which is why we're here this weekend in Oklahoma, because Jet's here.
Absolutely.
And Charlie.
I'd love the opportunity to go out and do that.
Yeah. But we just became really good friends, and so Jet and I can banter back and forth, and I had him come and call a dance at my club in Killeen, Texas, when I called for them for 9 years. And they were doing a special anniversary dance and they wanted Jet Roberts. So I kind of figured it out being friends with him that I got him there. And then once I got there, he wanted me to call with him. So I called not the whole dance, but a lot of the dance with him. And so that was just icing on the cake for me.
Wow, that's awesome. With this podcast, and I get to talk to a lot of people, but I know a lot of people pretty well now, caller wise, and I've got a top five. I haven't told anybody what they are in that order, just because of that. I've got my favorite singer, I've got my favorite choreographer and entertainer, and all that.
But I'll tell you, they all do too.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. So, coming up in California, and then going to Texas and all that, you've gotten around a little bit. I ask everybody, do any venues stand out to you that you've called at, whether it be the hardwood floor, the dancers, or buildings, anything like that?
Well, I've called at most of the nationals since 2010.
Mhm.
There's only a couple that I had to miss. And I always find it to be an honor and a blessing when they invite me to call with a band.
Sure.
And I really enjoy it. I always pick a song that I'm really good at, and they let me do it for some reason. And I always try to make sure that I'm on my best behavior, and because sometimes we're not, you know how that is. And I try not to let my ego get in the way. As all callers have, we all have an ego of some kind. Some are bigger than some are smaller, and I try to keep mine in check. But I think the national stage in the mainstream hall, the live band hall, is probably one of my favorites to call at when I get the opportunity, because I don't get to call it that every year. Um, I have a venue here in Texas in Waco. It's called the Alaman Hall. It's actually in Spiegelville, but we call it Waco. And Alaman Hall is a dedicated square dance hall, and it's a blessing to our community here in Central Texas,
Okay.
and that we have the availability to use this hall for whatever we need it for. And the board of directors is very willingly to work with anybody. If I wanted to put a special dance together, I could use the hall as long as it wasn't already booked. If we needed to, every year we do special dances. Like we just did the Texas Teen Scholarship dance, where the callers donate their time, and all the money that we raise goes to the Texas Teen Scholarship Fund, for kids who are going in from square dancing teens who are going from high school to college, and they can apply for scholarships for college. And so I just did that dance 2 weeks ago for them, along with Christina Wiggins, one of the callers that I've mentored and taught to learn. And I've been teaching her for the last 2.5, 3 years and mentoring her. And since I left Texas to go on that cruise, my other good friend here in Texas, Brad Caldwell, has taken over the duties of mentoring her. And so Christina Wiggins she's just dynamite, and she's going to be one of those callers you're going to talk about later on in years. But she's just fun. And so she and I got to do that dance together, that teen scholarship at Alaman Hall, the hall that you were asking about,
Okay.
what hall's special to us.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing that's special about that hall is a really, really, really good dancer, friend of ours, that when we moved to Texas, he kind of became a fan of Dan, as we call it. And his name was Billy Graham. And Billy would come to 4 dances a week to mine. Every week he'd come to 4 dances. And in early 2020, just before the COVID shutdown, he quit coming, and we weren't sure why. And he ended up getting in a car accident. And so my wife and Gail and I, for the next 4 years after that car accident, we became his caretakers because he didn't have any family.
Okay.
And so we as I always tell everybody, people ask, why did you do that? I said, because he's a square dancer. Square dancers take care of square dancers.
Sure.
And so God put us in a position. That's our belief. And so our position was we answer the call. And so we were his caretakers, and we managed all his funds and money and places where he needed to be, and his health care and all that for 4 years. Well, he passed while we were on the cruise, and another couple of square dancers was taking care of him while we were gone on the cruise. And in his estate, after I managed his estate when we got back, a lot of the money that he had, he designated to go to Alaman Hall. And so that hall will now be able to continue growing, continue to pay their bills, continue to pay their insurance, whatever they need to do, improvements, maintenance, whatever, because of this donation of a square dancer, you know. And I just look back at it and go, there's so many places that money gets donated to, or it goes into probate when somebody passes, and it does no good. But then you see something like this, and the money is really, you know, it's going to keep square dancing alive in the Waco area or the central Texas area for a long time.
That's awesome, man. I had no idea. That's amazing. Very nice. Now, you started out as a singer, and a little different. You know, most of the people that start out calling, not all, they do singing calls for a year or so. You know, and then they get down that road of choreography, which can be a long and winding road sometimes. And so, have you done any recordings or anything like that?
I have not been given the opportunity. I was asked one time by one record label to do a particular song, and I didn't choose the song. He chose the song. I won't name the label or the person, and I sat on it for 6 months because I didn't care for the song. I didn't like the way it was laid out. I didn't like the recording. I didn't like the music. And again, I'm a music buff. I'm a music aficionado, and so without telling the guy I'm being mean to him, I just said, he finally contacted me and said, "Are you ever going to do this song?" And I said, "You've never told me what you want me to do. Can I change that?" "No, you can't change the music." And I'm like, I don't think I'm the right person for this. You need to find somebody else. And he did. He found somebody else to do the song. And I still didn't like the song, but that was my opinion. There's a lot of people that buy it, so they must like it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for the right opportunity, the right producer, the right song. I am a country music aficionado. I listen to country music all the time. But the funny thing is, my wife she likes pop music, and so when we're in the car, we mix it both.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of the pop artists from a lot of their songs, a lot of the current songs. And so whenever somebody comes up with like TBT or Arrow, or somebody comes up with um, a current pop song or pop song that's fairly current, I immediately pick it up. And I mean, I usually know the words right away, and I can start singing that and just moving along. So as I'm singing, a Lady Gaga song
Mm-hmm.
or a Billie Eilish song or something, and the dancers have no idea who these artists are because they don't listen to that kind of music. They're used to the music from the 70s and the 80s, maybe the 60s. And they know Willie Nelson, and they know George Strait, and they know Alan Jackson, and the country side of things, and maybe on the pop side or the other side of things they would know some of the crooners from the 60s and 70s, but they don't know current pop artists. And I'm not saying I'm an expert at it, but that's kind of music I'm really into right now. And so all my pattern is that a lot of the songs I buy now. And so I'm really happy when producers create more current music that's something like less than 3 years old. And I like it when the song's still on the radio. And every once in a while I'll give them a suggestion. "Hey, take this and make it a pattern for me." But they don't. But it's okay. I think in the long run, because I do sing, I think I'll get my opportunity one day. But I'm not one of those people that said, "I have to record a song. I have to record something." It has to be the right song, has to be the right person to work with, has to be the right, everything. So I just want to make sure, I know that's kind of sounds pretentious from a singer's point of view, but I don't want to put something out that's trash.
Sure.
I want to put something out that's good, on key, good timing, good vocals, good choreography. I want it perfect. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
Now I know nothing's going to be perfect, but that's the way I look at it. And I'm not a perfectionist, but boy, when it comes to music, I'm really picky about what I want. And so, but Charlie, to answer your question, I really have not had the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that maybe somebody I can work with somebody to do that, and we'll do one together. But I need some guidance on how to do it because I've never done it.
Right.
So,
so what are some of your favorite singing calls right now that you would do?
well, now you're gonna put me on the spot. My absolute favorite singing call is a song that Ken Bauer recorded. You know, Ken Bauer from
Oh yeah.
California, Southern
Yes, sir.
California. So Ken and I became friends, but Ken did a song called On with the Show, and it's
Mhm.
the theme song of the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner hour for Saturday morning cartoons back when we were kids.
Okay.
And it's my absolute favorite, and I sing it almost, I close out almost every dance with it, or if it's a group of people I know and they all know that I like that song, I'll open with it. I either open or close with it. But
Okay.
On with the Show, I use Born This Way, a Lady Gaga song. I can't remember which producer did it that now, might be Riverboat, but I'd have to look it up. Um, but I use Born This Way by Lady Gaga. That's one of my favorite. I like a lot of the stuff that Blue Star puts out, that Buddy Weaver puts out. He's also another good friend in San Diego area. And Buddy puts out some excellent Blue Star music that I like. Beautiful Noise and some of the old classics that we like to use.
Yeah.
Um, but the music that I use mostly, that's all patter, is all new pop,
Sure.
and it's been condensed by the producers to the appropriate timing and everything. And so I liked a lot of the stuff that TBT's been putting out.
Yeah.
Again, Arrow, again, they've been putting out a lot of stuff. And of course, Shauna, my good buddy, have to get some Chic in there.
Hmm.
So, I pretty much buy everything she has. So every once in a while she comes up with one that it just doesn't fit my voice, so I don't buy it. But
And so I'm
that
not putting one over the other, but I agree. TBT with Ted Lizotte, some of his
yeah,
patter and singers are fantastic. He's right
yep,
in my wheelhouse for when it comes to music I like, 80s, late 70s, 80s. But
yeah,
like you said, he's got the Billie Eilish bad guy patter.
yep,
Every dance I play it at least once, depending on where I am.
yep.
I mean, my club I can't do it because I get tired. Every other week hearing the same thing, that one song. But I've gone to a couple of conventions and I was like, does anybody know who Billie Eilish is? Not one hand will go
No,
up.
I've done the same thing.
I did it in a youth hall, and I was just like, seriously, nobody knows who this is.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, and he just released Twilight Zone, which is a '70s,
yep,
and
yep,
it's fantastic dancing music. Um, as far as that, SD Bob, Square Dance Bob, um,
yep.
one of my favorites right now is REM, the one I love, and love singing that song. And so yeah, I try and go for the more current, if you want to say that. I mean, that's '80s and '90s, some of them that are coming out. And so I agree with you on that. And the pop stuff is a lot of fun. I don't listen to a lot of the pop now just because I don't listen to radio anymore. It's mostly Spotify, that type of thing. And if I go to Spotify, I'm just going straight to the '80s, and that's what I listen to.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Sirius XM subscriber, so I
Okay,
have to listen to
okay.
whatever. I can listen to pop, I can listen to adult entertainment, I can listen to country, whatever. So
I always try. I'll be on Spotify and I'll go into and I'll just search a playlist, and it always goes back to '80s pop, '80s rock, '80s country, and because that's just where I was. So, oh man. So well, we talked about your favorite singer and your music genre is country. Some of your favorite country artists, who are they?
well, back up a little bit. I grew up in the 70s in high
Okay.
school. That was my years, 70s. And so I grew up with the Eagles and Alice Cooper and Jethro Tull and Kiss and AC/DC and some pretty Led Zeppelin, some pretty heavy rock in there, and not disco. I mean, I went to discos, but
Yeah.
but the music I listened to was pretty much rock, and that 70s rock era. And Eagles was my absolute favorite band. And I pretty much know every word to every song that they ever made. And so whenever I see somebody create a producer create a song on the Eagles, I immediately go buy it and then kind of modify the music a little bit so that I can make it so it sounds more like the original. A lot of them do a really, really good job make them sound like the original. So I like that. Um, but as things progress, and I was in the Navy for 6 years, and when I was in the Navy, I got introduced to country music by a guy who was born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana, and he was the leader of our team, and he wouldn't let us listen to anything but country. And he introduced us to uh, all kinds of different country music from back in the 80s. And so that was um, George Strait. Um, can't even remember them all now, but there's so many from that era. Willie Nelson and of course, Johnny Cash was still big back then in the 80s, and um, um, all the different guys from that era, Chris Christopherson, and they were all in that era. And that's the kind of Don Williams. That was one of the ones that, for some reason, the love ballads he created. And I finally realized that the reason I like that kind of genre music was because I like lyrics. I like the story, and country music told a story where Alice Cooper wasn't really telling a story, there was a little bit maybe in there, but it was the music then. But now it's kind of it shifted in the 80s to country. And so I became a country's person, and I listened to country and then as the new people came in, the Garth Brookses and the Alan Jacksons and all those guys came in, Clint Black and stuff, they came in. And so I started really honing in on that type of music, and those are the songs that I sang and the songs I repeated. And when I could sing a concert of all country music in my car to myself or to my wife at the time, or my kids. Um, and I just enjoyed it. I just love singing. And Gals will tell you that I sing in the car all the time. It's just something I do. I'll put on a particular radio station, and even if I don't know all the words to a song, I know part of them. I'll get to that part and I'll sing that part of it. I think we all kind of do that in a way, but country was kind of my thing, and as I was in the Navy, that kind of started it. And then after I got out of the Navy, I kind of continued it because, again, I liked the lyrics part of it, the storytelling, the process. It wasn't so much the music. I liked the music, but I also like pop music, and that's what she likes, and so that's why we get to alternate back and forth, and we get to listen to different types of music all the time. And so I got to learn all about, and I don't just learn about the artists. Okay, I go and research them. I go on to Google them and find out, well, who is Billie Eilish? Oh, well, that's so and so's sister, and he wrote all the songs for her. Her brother, and and then I start going deeper into, who's this artist and who's this artist and why are they there? And oh, they were married to her, so you find all this dirt stuff underneath and this, and that's why that's why they write these songs, and they come out really good because they were their sob stories of a breakup, or they're the love stories of a new relationship, or whatever they are. And so that's kind of why I like those songs. I'm waiting for Taylor Swift to create a new one for Travis Kelce, but
Travis Kelce,
we'll,
that's
hoping
coming.
it's a love. Yeah,
it's coming all right.
But anyway, I divert a little bit. Sorry, but anyway, long story short, it's country. Most of the time, it's country, and now today's country is a little bit different. The artist that I like today is Kane Brown in the country world. I love the stuff that he's putting out. He just puts out some family, wholesome, good stuff. Some of the new artists that are coming up, I would never have put them in the country genre, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now they're in the country genre. And so I'm tolerating it somewhat, but I'm still kind of old school country. And so, but there are some really good talented artists. I am pleasantly surprised how much I like Jelly Roll.
Is that right?
And a lot of people will say, Jelly Roll country, really? He's not really supposed to be there. Well, he wasn't. He was in the other genres, R&B and rap. But when he came on, he became saved, and he's written a song about that, by the way, if you didn't know. And he got saved. He found out that he was really more of a country writer.
Yeah.
And that's when he started writing his country songs. And that's how he's become so popular in the country art. And then on the other side, the female side of it, Lainey Wilson's my absolute favorite, along with Carrie Underwood on the women's side of it, country. Nice. That kind of covers a lot of genre.
It does. But that's good. I'm slow to the newer country right now, just because, again, I don't listen to a lot of it. I'll always kind of lean back to George Jones, George Strait. If I'm listening to stuff, if I really want to go out there, I'll go to Alan Jackson. That's newer country for me, Alan Jackson. I don't think he's done anything new in 15 years.
And he's on his last tour right now.
Yeah,
with his Alzheimer's, he's got.
Yeah, so. He's got some medical issues, and going back to what you were saying earlier, the only one I disagreed with you on about rock groups and all that is I had to swear off Jethro Tull when they beat Metallica for album of the year, and I don't know what
Oh,
80s year that was. Aqualung, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm never listening to that guy." And so that's the only one there because I'm a big Metallica guy, Metallica and Scorpions. But
I think they.
um, but yeah, I've
So you
seen.
were a Metallica guy?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, I could
Metallica,
see that.
Scorpions, and Def Leppard. That's my three right there.
I could
But
see you being a rocker.
I've yet to find a Metallica song that I could convert over. Inner Sandman's actually 126 beats per minute, but I don't know how I could pull that off. So I haven't run that past Tony
and,
Oxenden yet. So
and there probably wouldn't be very many people that would understand it, so wouldn't buy it.
no,
So
no, no. That's the other thing. I've recorded one song and I did it with Tony Oxendine and Ted Lazat a couple years ago, and I did George Strait's Troubadour. But early on, I gave him a bunch of different artists and songs that I wanted to try, and he told me, he said, Charlie, he said, you need to find somebody that people know because that's what they're going to search for on whatever
yep.
website. And so that's why I went with George Jones, because there's one out one of my favorite country people right now is a guy named Sturgill Simpson. And he's kind of an old school sound to country. Some of his lyrics are a little questionable for square dancing, but some of them aren't. So yeah, that was the main thing. You got to find somebody that other artists, would go on and search George Jones, George Strait, that type of thing. So maybe one day we can get a Sturgill Simpson or a Metallica in there. Who knows? We got with Def Leppard's there. Ted's got
Yeah,
Def
you're
Leppard
right.
songs in there. So
And there is one by Led Zeppelin too. So
yep,
I do that singing call. So yeah.
yeah, and I should have looked before I started talking about. I don't know the label now. I'm not going to bring it up because that's embarrassing. But there's some newer songs out there, and so that's a lot of fun there. If you could record a song, any of them right off the top of your head that you know right now that you'd like to make a country song, a square dance song?
You know, not really. I don't want to put. I don't want to. Without going through my list of things.
I got you.
There's
No,
so
that's
many
good.
songs. There's so many good songs that have been done. Like I said, all the Eagles songs have been done pretty
Mhm.
much. Most of the Alan Jackson songs have been done. Most of the George Strait songs have been done. So in that genre from the 80s and 90s and stuff, that 70s, 80s, and 90s, that most of that's been done. And then of course Scott Bennett in his record recording his three recording labels, he's done everything from the 70s. I
Yep.
mean, and Scott's a good friend here. He lives here in Oklahoma, and when Scott, anytime he puts something new, I got to go listen to it at least. I don't necessarily always go get it,
Mhm.
but I have to go listen to it because it is the years that I grew up. And he and he's a little bit, I think he's a little younger than I am, but he and I grew up in that era where, he played in a band back in
Yeah.
the 70s. And so he knows that music inside and out. And so when he puts something out, I have to go listen to it. And I'd say 70, 85% of the time I go buy it because it's the music that I was ingrained with growing up in the 70s as a high school kid. And so that's why I like, working, looking at the music that he does. And then sometimes he goes off on a tangent and does something from a band that I probably never even heard of from the 70s. And I'm like, because I was never a rocker from the 80s and I didn't know the Metallicas and I'm sorry, Def Leppards and any of those. And sometimes there'll be a song he'll put out and I'm like, who the heck did that? And he'll tell me. And I had never heard it because that's when I shifted to country and I quit listening to that kind of
Yeah.
music. So yeah, but it's fun. It's fun to go through I love going through the different producers' websites and just looking at all the new music that comes in. And for the longest time, I thought there was only like five producers. And then somebody said, well, look at Music for Callers.
Mhm.
And years ago, probably, 2010, 2011. And I started looking at Music for Callers and I'm like, wow, there's like 50 or 60
Yep.
different producers out there. And I had no idea there were that many. And I was very pleased because then I would go and look at Riverboat and then I'd go look at Arrow and then I'd go look at, and start talking to these guys, Dean Singleton and Ted Lazat and all these different ones, TBT and of course the classics, Royal Records and
Rhythm.
um,
Hang on,
She,
froze just a second.
Shauna and I, by the way, Shauna and I were in the same beginners 2009 at that Long Beach National. So she and I were in there, and that's how I got to meet her and know her. Well, I already knew Vic, her husband, but I didn't know her, and that's when she became a caller. And then she of course, Chic Recording. So, but yeah, there's so many good record labels out there now,
Now,
and
I love
callers aren't
Shauna's
buying music. That,
recordings. Oh, she.
and, and I always tell callers, new callers in particular, you need to be going out and buying music. Spend some money, put buy 2 songs a month, 4 songs a month, whatever it is, even if it's one singer and three patter or two and two. Help support the producers, but buy good music. There's so much good music out there.
Yeah, and I try and get that across to some people. I'm fortunate; I've got a lot of music now, and I've done a whole dance of Scott Bennett's 3 labels. I mean, I've got
Yeah.
so much of his stuff, and I'll type out a little set list like I'm a artist or something like that, and I'll take a picture and I'll send it to Scott, and I'm like, I'm doing an entire dance of your singing calls, and so I love me some Scott Bennett, that's for sure. But yeah, on the Chic records with Shauna, I've got a few of hers. I don't have a lot. I've probably got 6 or so singing calls of hers, and she's got one that's so good. I love doing it, and it's something that you don't normally hear. It's Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. It's a Disney. If you've ever been to Disney,
It's a great big beautiful
yep,
tomorrow, shining at the light of every day.
she's got that on her label, and it is just fantastic. David Me does the male vocals for it, and so I
Yeah,
grab
David's a
that
good friend.
immediately. I've done that a few times. uh
David's another one of those Southern California callers, so that's why he's a good friend.
yeah, I've tried for about 6 months. We've talked a couple times through text and everything else. I'm trying to lock him down. I'd love to do a podcast with him too. Never had the opportunity to meet him.
Yeah,
um but yeah, after I saw
probably
some
what
of the stuff he did with,
he's probably one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in the
okay,
world.
definitely got to get him on too.
You got to get him.
And I got to get Brad too. You told me you're out there with Brad and all them.
Yeah,
And
Brad's amazing.
I've got to sit down and talk with Brad a few times at different conventions here and there. Because that's really when I get to run into anybody that side of Alabama.
Yeah.
Alabama to California, I only see them at conventions for the most part right now. And so, because I strictly stay pretty much on the East Coast as far as traveling. And so I got to get Brad too. Well, Dan, man, I would love to talk to you more about the cruise and your square dance stuff. So I would like to do this again at some point. Is there anything else you want to put out there about you that we didn't talk about?
Yeah, I just kind of want to say the last thing. I was thinking about this, how we're going to end this. As a full-time traveling caller now, I'm just picking up gigs across, the
Yeah.
United States and Canada where I can. But our base is usually out of North Carolina, the Raleigh area. And I want to say that I have been so blessed when we got to Raleigh in right after the cruise, because that's where our grandkids are, by the way.
Okay.
Um, when we got there, the community of square dancing just opened up to us and said, "Hey, come call for us. Come call for us." And in particular, Eva Murray, she's putting together a big program in the Raleigh area,
Mhm.
and she had me come in and do her classes, her plus classes and plus dances every Monday night. She would have me do her Saturday dance once a month with well, other callers in there too, but I would do then the other club that's there, the Square Hills, they had me come in and fill in for Patty Green one time when she had something going on, and so she couldn't make it, and so I filled in for her, and now they're hiring back, and so I just and then there's another group there that Christopher Schlitter puts together an advanced group in his home. He and his wife Risha, and there's just the community of the advanced dancers who's just welcomed Gail and I in as if we have been long lost friends. And so I feel the warmth and the welcoming from the whole Raleigh area people, the community of square dancers. And I just wanted to say shout out to them and say thank you because, they could reject us Texan and Californian and say, you're not one of us. But I'm really grateful that they've opened up their arms and they've allowed us to come in and have me do some calling. And and teaching and doing whatever we need to do to keep square dancing alive in that area. And so when they know my schedule and I'm going to be there in that area, I know I got dances to call. I know I got classes to teach.
Okay.
And so I'm very grateful for that I have those opportunities.
I should have asked you that early on. What level how high a level do you call to?
I call all the way through A2 advance.
Okay.
That's the level that my wife and I love to dance. Well, so when
Okay.
we go to weekends or festivals or nationals or whatever, we spend 99% of our time in the advanced hall.
Oh, okay.
But as an entertainer and a singer, I like the mainstream and plus halls and the SSD. And I know the list lines very well until we decide to change them again. And then somebody asked me this question, and I think this is probably the most important question I was ever asked as a caller. If you could only do one, Dan, would you teach or would you call a dance? And my absolute answer every time is teach.
Okay.
I love teaching beginners. I've taught 28 beginner square dance classes in the 15 years I've been a caller. I have taught 7 advanced classes, and I've taught 14 plus classes. And I love teaching, and I love the process of watching a dancer progress from knowing nothing in that particular level to knowing everything at the end, and making them proficient at it, not just from standard positions, but from all the different positions that there are. And so that's the way I teach. And I try to make it so that they understand the definitions so that they could do it from any position. And they're not just limited to standard positions. Now, in the very beginning, when you're teaching SSDs, you got to limit to the standard positions until you get to the the extended. But I love teaching. And if I could just find a place just to teach forever, I would do that. But I also like being on that stage, like being the entertainer. So it's it's one of those things you got to do. And one of the things Jet Robert taught me when I first met him, he goes, I travel all over the world and I call all over the world and I call every weekend at all these festivals and all these different things. He goes, but I still teach a beginner's class at my house in my hometown. And I'm like, you don't need to. He goes, no, it isn't about needing, it's about wanting to. And so anyway, he taught me that lesson. And so I wanted to always make sure that I gave back by teaching. And I feel I'm a pretty good teacher. I've been told I'm a pretty good teacher. So
Awesome. Well, now that you are a full-time traveling caller and literally traveling in your RV, and I definitely want to figure out something to get you down here. I've talked to I say all my dancers. I have 2 clubs here in Georgia, and I call it a bunch of other clubs. And I started something last year where, as well as I do, especially on the teaching part of it, to be a better dancer, you have to dance more than every first and third Friday with your club caller. Okay. You can be a good dancer, but that's like, I'm going to take up guitar and I'm just going to play every first and third after I learn all the songs. You're not going to be good.
no.
And the other part of it is you have to dance to more than your club caller. And I'm not telling you to go to other, but you need to go if somebody comes into town. I say all that because I started trying to bring in friends of mine right now and people that I know. And like I said, Charlie Robertson was here 2 weeks ago. He did a dance at one of my clubs, and we had a bunch of people come in. And I told my dancers, I said, I want to do this for y'all. Plus, it's a free school for me because I get to see Charlie Roberts do with his thing, which I don't normally get to see.
Right.
And so I would definitely like to bring you through. And we've got some other clubs down here that like to dance advanced. I can't do advanced. I just don't know it. And so definitely I'll talk to you after we're done with this. I would love to figure out a way to get you down here to a few dances in Georgia, and we'll get something worked out. That'd be awesome. Dan,
We'd
it has
love
been a
to.
pleasure getting to actually sit down and talk to your brother. And I see you got your Caller Lab shirt on. You're going to be at Caller Lab's convention this year?
No, unfortunately, we're going to be we were going to be in Europe this year, so
Okay.
we missed last year for the cruise, and then this year, what our schedule of what we needed to do. We're going to places that we didn't get to go to on the cruise, but this time we're doing land tours, and so we're going to Scotland, Ireland, and Greece, the Greek islands. So we're going for 2 months, and it happens to be the time that we're
Okay.
at the Colorado Lab convention.
Well, I was hoping
But,
to get
but we got Reno on our calendar for next year.
got Reno. Outstanding. Well, man, that's great. I was hoping to meet you at Color Lab. It'll have to be Reno because I'm planning on going to Reno again
Okay.
and like it out there.
Well, maybe I'll come down to Georgia.
And we'll definitely, hopefully, before Reno, we can get you down here to Georgia. I'll get with your schedule, with your cruising schedule and everything else, and we'll bring you down here to Georgia with your advance. We'll get you over to Hot Atlanta, and we'll do some other stuff. Dan, it's been a pleasure talking to you, brother, and I hope to meet you soon.
Yes, you too. Thank you, Charlie, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Take it easy, Dan.
Yeah. Have a good day.
You too.
Side space, grand square, I still feel 25. Most of the time, I still raise a little Cain with the boys. Alaman left and weak, honky tonks and pretty women. Lord, I'm still right there with them, singing above the crowd and the noise. Poor lady's chain